What's up YouTube, it's Saint, and in my last video, A Tale of Two Builds, which some people were calling a visual tour de force, and, quote, a video that had commentary in it. I showed off this disgusting build that I had started making, and this is more of that disgusting build. Before I even, really get into what we're doing in the video, I just want to emphasize that my intention of making this build is not so that people will copy the build. It's just to show all the different ways with very little stats that you can use to essentially break your opponent's poise in this game. Very little stats required for any of the things that we're doing, and very little stats required to break our opponent's poise. Why is that important, Saint? Why does that matter? Because you and your opponent are locked in a deadly game called Elden Ring. And, people are complaining about invasions and that they're hard. And stop me if I've heard this one before, and I have back in 2016. But it's time to learn to invade. So your opponent has a button, right? And we're going to call it the win button. They press a button and they win. And it's your job to make them stop pressing the win button, or to make the win button not do what it's supposed to do. And you can do that with very little stat investment. You can throw it on any build. There's a bunch of different ways to do it. You don't have to do it the way I'm doing it. All that matters is poise damage versus your opponent's poise. What do you have, what can you have that does poise damage enough so that the person pressing the win button doesn't get to win when they press the win button? That's all that, if poise damage is greater than poise versus then mash button against win. Just a simple formula, right? The hard part is figuring out a way to get them alone. If you can do that, you're good, you're golden. That's it, that's all it takes. And again, it doesn't have to be catch flame, it doesn't have to be rock thrower, whatever, bestial sling, it doesn't have to be any of these things. And again, the purpose of this video is not to look at this build. Oh, you gotta play this build. It's OP meta with hate meta. Shh. I hate that. I hate it. I hate it. It's the worst thing that ever happened to these games. This is just me making a gross build to prove a point, to show you why, these spells, these low-level spells, they're very good. And they're very good because this is a game that is based around PvE. It's based around like fighting bosses and monsters. It's not balanced towards PvP. It's balanced towards the other thing. All right. As a result, the early stuff is always the best stuff. There's a reason. There's a reason that it's always the best stuff. There's a reason the stock is just awesome in every one of these games. There's a reason the longsword is good. There's a reason the hand axe is good in all of these games. And it's because you start with it, or you find it right off the bat. And the same is true for the spells that you start with, or that you find right off the bat. They have to be good, because what if you don't get another spell? What if you don't get another weapon? Those weapons have to be able to carry you through the game. This is, just the way video games work. So Bestial Sling does a bazillion poise damage. Catch Flame does a bazillion poise damage. Carrion Slicer does 1,000,000 damage. And it's fast as hell. Your opponent has a win button. And your entire... not all of your opponents are going to have the win button, but a lot of them will. A lot of them will have a win button. And if your opponent has the win button, your job is to make them not be able to use it. Interrupt them. Stop them from being able to hit the win button. Certain poise values are gonna, like the veterans armor and all that stuff, you can like really get like tanky and poisey. And that's something that you're going to run into from over-leveled phantoms, especially over-leveled ganking phantoms, and in duels, right? Where essentially the point is to have the most busted, stuff that you can have. And then everyone can complain about how they don't like all this busted stuff that everyone's using and that they're also using. That's the real meta. That's the real meta. If I sound a little tired today, it's because I've been in the car driving for 10 hours. And this is like the third time I've tried to record this commentary. I usually just end up on a diatribe, ranting about what things could be different or might be different later on. But I don't want to do that because I don't want to like backseat develop here. I just want to talk about what we have and what there is. So my point, you can stack a million billion poise, right? And you'll see that a lot in high level, at meta level with duels. You'll see over-leveled phantoms doing it. And in that instance, it's obviously more difficult to make someone not be able to just press their win button, right? But if that is the majority of your invasions, if the majority of your invasions are that, then I don't know. That is not the experience that I have. I don't understand. Like, everyone acts like they run into that like every other invasion. And I just, look, I have like 700 hours in this game already. And I don't see it that often. I don't see how anyone is seeing it that often. It doesn't make sense to me. Like, unless you're like, fighting a guy who's wearing Blythe's armor and you confuse it and think it's the veteran's armor. Something like that maybe. I don't, that. But even still, I just don't understand. I don't see, full bull goats, rivers of blood. I just don't see it that often. I don't. I see Bloodhound Step. I see, bleed out dual curved swords. I see all that stuff. But like, that's just a guy with a win button, right? That's not a problem. That's a guy with a win button, but he doesn't have the poise to back his win button up. So it's not entirely difficult to, just like, hey, brother, you just don't get to press your win button right now. I'm sorry. You're going to have to learn how to play without that, because I'm just going to interrupt it over and over again. But, yeah, this was the thing back in the Dark Souls 3 videos when I would make those. I would always talk about how it's important to have tools. You have to have tools for an invasion. And, things like the obscuring ring, the silver cat ring, things like this, things that helped you escape, things that helped you hide, things that helped you, great bows were an excellent tool in Dark Souls 3, much like the jar cannon is a great tool in Elden Ring. Something that allows you to pester people who don't want to engage with you, but you kind of force them to have to engage, because if they don't, you're just going to blow them up with a cannon, right? Well, these spells are also tools, and this goes back to like Dark Souls 1. I loved straight swords. I always loved straight swords. I wanted to use the Balder Side Sword. Well, the Balder Side Sword's not going to break anybody's poise. Unless they're playing like a no poise build, which some people do, but the majority of people don't. Even on accident, they don't play low poise builds. You can accidentally have a lot of poise. It happens all the time in Dark Souls 1. So, what do you do if you want to use the Balder Side Sword? You put Black Flame on your build. Or you put Wrath of God on your build. You put something on your build that is capable of breaking poise. You need something that can stagger your opponent so that they can't just mash their win button. That's it. That's all. And in Elden Ring, you have options. You have choices. You have things to choose from that will break your opponent's poise. What I'm showing you here with this build is not the only options that you have. There are other options that you can have. Now, if I show you these tools, I show you these options, and I tell you this, and you still say, well, I just don't like the invasions. Fair enough. Nothing I can do there. But I just don't think people understand what they have available to them with all these like low FP cost, low stat requirement spells. This build is, you know, I mean, what are we looking at here? Like, what does it take to make this build? Like 12 faith and 14 intelligence or something like that? You know? These spells cost nothing. And they're some of the best spells in the game. I was playing around a little bit with O Flame, just to like check it out and see what was up with it. And it's not as good as Catch Flame. And it never will be. Because Catch Flame is a spell that you start with. And O Flame is a spell that you find later on. So as a result, you know, O Flame is fine if you're fighting bosses, you know, but I'm talking about PvP here. Catch Flame is going to just always be the way to go, because it's balanced to be a powerful spell to beat the game with, to beat the enemies, to beat the bosses. The early game bosses have to be, mechanically speaking, the most difficult. Now you can be like, well, Melina is hard or whatever, and she is, and I get that, but the bosses at the very beginning of the game, that sort of pop quiz, hey, do you know how to play the game? Do you know how to press buttons? Those bosses by design have to be mechanically, you know, as difficult as anything else in the game. Everything else is just taking those mechanics and, you know, putting a different hat on them and making you learn what the hat is like. So you have to be able to use these spells that you start with in order to beat those bosses, right? Does that make sense? So these spells have to be good, so they're good in PvP, because they just have to be good. That's all there is to it. So grab you a good spell and hit somebody with it. And I'm also working on another build, but I also I have to rethink my entire playstyle with that build, and it doesn't use any magic, and I'm gonna see if I can make it go, and we'll see what happens. Anyway, thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time. Until then, later, y'all.